Shortly after Taurus released the GX4, I managed to get my hands very briefly on a T&E sample and did a very short video on that back in May of 2021. Only had it for a couple hours, not enough time to really spend much time getting used to the gun. Had to give it back. We've managed to get that same gun back for a little longer period of time now, and I've put it through some of my normal testing, and we're going to talk about it. Stick around. I want to welcome you to Riders Range. Thanks for joining us today. We're going to take a little more in-depth look at the GX4, and we're going to put it side by side with a couple other guns that I have that are in the same general class. I had a problem with this gun. I want to talk about that a little bit later. I actually had a couple of them, and I'm not the only one who's had some issues with this particular gun. We'll talk about my conclusions as we get to the end. But first, some good. And one good thing about it is its size. And of course, another good thing is maybe its price. MSRP on this gun is about $392, I believe. You can pretty much find them all day long at about $330 plus or minus. We're going to compare that also with the G3c, which we've done a review on. I'll try to remember to post that up here. And the G3c retails for about $340, but you can find these pretty much all day long around $250 to $300, depending on where you look. But the comparison I like to do most is with the Sig P365. I've also done a review on this, and this is actually probably a better comparison than the G3c, although the price is a whole different ballgame, but the features are also a little different too. So we'll talk more about those here in just a minute. Sig doesn't publish the MSRPs on their website, but you can pretty much find the 365 all day long for around $500. There are a lot of them available right now. So size-wise, again, I'm not going to give you all the dimensions, the length, the width, the height, and all that. You can find that on other channels that like to get into that kind of detail, but you can also find it on the manufacturer's website. But I do want to compare it quickly with the 365. The overall length is going to be about the same. The difference is the 365 has the 3.1 inch barrel. The GX4 has a 3.06 inch barrel, so roughly 3.1. The 365 on the left, the slide is a little bit narrower. You see the grip is a little wider on this because I had to put a Hogue Handall Jr. on it in order to make it fit my hand. The circumference on the grip on the 365 is just, for me, a little small and uncomfortable. But the grips without the sleeve on it are going to be about the same. And again, you can see the height is about the same. Now, there's a standard magazine in each. The magazine that I've got in the in the GX4 is 11 rounds. By the way, guns are all empty here on the tabletop. Magazine in the 365 is the one that it normally comes with as a 10-round magazine. It also comes with 10-round with you can get a pinky extension on it, which makes it just a little bit more grippable. And 365 can also work with a 12-round magazine, and you can even use the 365 XL 15-round magazine with a base on it. So you've got options there. I don't have the other magazines for the GX4, but you can also get a 13-round magazine for the GX4, and you can get additional magazines for the G3c. Big difference here. This is a GX4 review, not a 365. Big difference is going to be price. You can also get pinky extensions for about $5 for the standard magazine. All the magazines for the GX4 and the G3c, regardless of the capacity, are going to run about $36 on the manufacturer's website, whereas they're about $50 for the Sig magazines. So again, this is 11 plus 1 capacity, which means it gives you 12 rounds out of the box, whereas the 365 standard only gives you 11. The G3c comes with a 12-round magazine, so you got 13. So really you have 11 rounds, 12 rounds, 13 rounds, depending on how you want to look at it. And there's also a difference. I got to remember to put the right gun up here. There's also a difference in weights. And again, I'd rather talk about loaded weights now, since these all have different capacities. I did the testing with not with their max capacity, but all loaded up to the same. Since the Sig 365 is the lowest capacity at 10 plus 1, then I weighed all of these with 10 plus 1. The GX4 comes out at 1 pound, 7.8 ounces. The 365 is not quite an ounce heavier at 1 pound, 8.6. and that difference would be made up by adding the extra round, of course, to the GX4. And finally, the G3c comes in at 1 pound 10.6 ounces, but again, you can have the ability to add more. Now again, those are all with the same 10 plus 1 or 11 total rounds. The G3c had a much more assertive texture, certainly over the G2c. Very nice texture on that. They toned it down quite a bit on the GX4. Now maybe that's because it's more designed for deeper carry, and they didn't want the heavier grip texture abrading the hands. Don't know what the exact reasoning for that is, but the texture is certainly acceptable. It's not quite what you would get out of skateboard tape or a Talon grip, but it's certainly acceptable. A little different texture, at least it feels a little different between the front and back strap and the grip itself, although it looks like it's probably about the same. Texture is right where you need it, and with the grip extension, the pinky extension on it, it would be able to give you a full grip. Slightly squared off trigger guard if you're still one of those who shoots in the 1980s style of putting your finger on the front, or if you're Lena Mikulik, who can pretty much shoot anything anyway, but that's her style and works well for her. It's pretty much gone out of fashion for most people, and for very good reason. It does have a slightly undercut trigger guard. You can get your grip up on it fairly high. This one does not have a safety, whereas the G3c does have a safety, and the 365 comes with or without a safety. Simple takedown. I'm not going to get into the procedures of the takedown. It's fairly easy to do, although not quite as intuitive as some of the others. Not exactly my favorite style of takedown. I don't know why Taurus decided to change it, but they changed a number of things on this pistol. And good grip, good feel, shootable gun. The big change on this from the G3c, besides the grip, is the trigger. The slightly curved trigger on the G3c is, and again, by the way, we are unloaded, is a fairly long take up, and there's a reason for that we'll talk about in just a second, but a little bit of creep, clean break, a little bit of over travel on this trigger, and this comes out at 3 pounds 2 ounces pretty much all day long. However, this G3c does have a double strike capability. That comes out at 4 pounds 11 ounces, which really isn't too bad. Reset on the G3c, fairly short, tactile, noticeable, and again, a decent break. But they changed the style on the GX4. It's now a flat trigger, which, we are empty, which breaks pretty much at just about 90 degrees, pretty much vertical. And it has a different type of tab on it, different type of feel. And this one breaks pretty much at 3 pounds 6 ounces all day long. Nice thing about the GX4 trigger, much less take up than the G3c. Very clean, crisp break, and absolutely no over travel. Nice short reset, but not very tactile at all. It's hard to feel and very hard to hear. But if you're shooting rapidly, you're not going to be hitting right at the reset anyway. I watched some of the pro shooters shoot fast, and some of them, Bill Wilson's one of them, his finger comes all the way off the trigger before he hits it again. So reset's nice for training, but it's not practical in, at least in my experience, in rapid shooting. The 365, on the other hand, is what I would normally compare this to. A different shape of the trigger, does not have the trigger drop safety on it. Some people consider the trigger tabs a safety. It's only a safety if, as far as dropping the gun or pushing on the side of the trigger, but anything that gets in the trigger guard is going to defeat the safety anyway. So this does not have the trigger tab safety. Again, it does have an external safety. And trigger has a little bit of take up. There's a couple of notches in the trigger pull. It's not quite as crisp and clean as the GX4, but there is, again, no over travel. Short, tactile reset, and again, just a notch or two in the pull. Still a decent trigger. This one comes in at 3 pounds 14 ounces all day long, whereas my 365 XL comes in at 3.4. And all of these figures that I'm giving you are my guns under my circumstances. Your guns may be different. You may be able to put 3 GX4s all side by side, and even though the parts are all computer controlled and theoretically all the same tolerances, you're going to find the trigger pull is going to differ on every single one of them. So I'm only telling you what's on mine, not on everything. The sights on the GX4, a notch rear, and the sights are a problem that I'm going to talk about here in just a second. Front is a simple white dot. You got the same basic arrangement on the G3c. You got a notch rear and just a plain post front sight. Now, it's my understanding that these are Glock compatible sights, so anything that fits on a Glock, which are available all over the place, will fit on the GX4. On the other hand, the sights on the Sig are night sights, and that's how it comes. You pay extra for it, but this comes with those night sights. Front and rear cocking serrations, they're not super aggressive. They'll get the job done. They're about the same as what you'd find on the other two guns. Certainly not like you'd find on a Staccato, but again, different class of gun. Magazine release is real easy to get to. Magazine does pop out nicely. Not ambidextrous, although you can change the magazine release to the opposite side. The slide stop lever is strictly left side on this gun. Does have a nice textured pad up on the front for shooting with a high grip, or as an index point on the right, and again, if you're left-handed, that would be just reversed. So there are a lot of nice touches on it. Very much melted off all the way around. No sharp edges on this except the inside of the ejection port. If you're carrying this in a leather-lined holster, you may find that that the sharper edge on the ejection port snags on the leather coming out and will eventually wear through in that area. Typical external extractor. A decent fit and finish all the way around. Not unhappy at all with how the GX4 feels. And so far it's been relatively reliable. The only problems I had with this gun were a hang-up once with a 147 grain Golden Saber. It didn't want to go into battery by itself, just nudged the slide and it went in. So how does it shoot is the big thing. This is a defensive gun, so I'll be criticized for shooting it at 50 yards or trying to shoot it at 50 yards. But again, that's what I do. If the gun will shoot at 50 yards, you know it's going to shoot at everything closer. If you only try it at 7 yards, you have no idea what it's going to do if and when you have to take that longer shot. As a civilian, the chances of that happening are pretty slim, but I want to make sure that my gun is going to be super accurate under controlled circumstances at 50 yards. That way I know that when the adrenaline's running and I really need to crank off rounds defending myself or someone else at a close distance, that the gun has the accuracy. And in this case, well, come on. Watch. We'll get to it here in just a second. I tried it initially at 12 yards when we did the first review, and I had a problem with the sight being what I would call a self-adjusting rear sight. And as you can see right now, that sight is to the right of center on the slide. Twice I've drifted this sight back over. Now I can't move it by hand, but twice I've drifted the rear sight back over to center it and sighted the gun, and it's moved over to the right during the shooting process. We put 5 or 6 shots on 4 different targets at 15 yards. The first shot you'll see in the upper left here was on a bullseye at 15 yards, shooting 115 grain ammunition. It wasn't real happy with that. Now somebody's going to jump right in here and say, well, gee, it's just I can't shoot the gun. Well, okay, I'm going to roll in some quick footage of my Sig 365. Again, basically the same type of gun, where it's much more accurate, and all the way out to 50 yards, the 365 is able to hit what I need to. So no, it's in this case, sorry folks, it's not the shooter, it's the gun. And again, you may have a GX4 that you can shoot the hair off a fly at 50 yards. That's fine. But this particular GX4, the one that's sitting in front of you right now, does not have the kind of accuracy that I would personally want. Is it suitable for defense? Absolutely. If you can group 5 or 6 inches even at 15 yards regularly, it's suitable for defense. Would I trust my life to it? Yeah, if I needed to, and not my first choice of carry, but we'll talk more about that here in a minute. So we moved over to 124 grain ammunition. It grouped a little bit better, but you can see by the targets here that it liked 147 grain ammunition the best. and 147 grain Golden Saber seemed to work fairly well out of this. Got a decent group. Shooting a little low, and if you've watched enough of the reviews on the GX4, you know that this gun just shoots a little bit low. The heavier the ammunition, the higher it's going to shoot, the closer to point of aim. So if I were to carry this, I'd be carrying it with 147 grain defensive ammunition in it. And worked at 12 yards. Once I got the sight drifted right, I was fine at 12. I started to have a little bit of struggle at 25 yards, particularly going for the 8-inch blade and then the 6-inch head flipper on the torso. I had some difficulties. And reaching out at 50, I couldn't even hit the big silver gong first time through. And several shots at the 16-inch blade at 50 yards, couldn't hit it. That's when I noticed that sight had drifted all the way to the right again. When I threw in some Kentucky windage, I was okay again at the 16 and even the 12 a couple of times. But the self-adjusting rear sight is something that, again, it's a T&E gun. If it were mine, I would try Glock sights and see if I could make a sight work in this without self-adjusting. And then if that didn't work, this thing would go back to Taurus. We'd have to try out their customer service. I've seen at least one other review where their rear sight drifted. I've seen a couple of reviews where the front sight came off. In fact, I saw one review where the rear sight actually came out when they were shooting it. I don't know if it's just a machining tolerance issue with the GX4 or not, but again, this is an early sample and it's a T&E gun. Maybe they've tightened it up since then. Maybe your gun's not going to have an issue. This gun did. Now again, I've only got, at this point, about 100 rounds for this gun, so I can't fully attest to its reliability. However, I have several hundred rounds of the G3c, and that's reliable enough so that I'll carry it. In fact, I do carry it when I'm working around the house, and I don't want to have a more expensive gun that is likely to be dropped or banged into things more. And I would carry this for defense if I needed to. I'm happy with the reliability of it. So I presume that the reliability on the GX4 is going to be pretty much the same. So do I have a conclusion on it? And the answer is yes, I do. I'll take my Sig 365 all day long. It's a fraction heavier. It's one round down on the capacity. It does have a better trigger, better sights out of the box. And again, the trigger is just a hair heavier, but I still like it better. And the accuracy of the 365, in my opinion, at least for my sample firearms, is fantastic for a 3.1-inch barrel gun. Second choice, again, I'm not going to pocket carry. If I were going to pocket carry, the second choice wouldn't even come into it. But the G3c, for belt carry inside or outside the waistband, I'd take the G3c over the GX4. For pocket carry, frankly, I wouldn't rush into any of these for pocket carry. There are, I think, better options, although maybe slightly reduced capacity. Although when you're looking at a gun that's only roughly a pound and a half loaded, dropping it in a holster, I would never carry it in a pocket without a holster, particularly with no safety on it. But dropping it in a holster in the pocket, that'd probably get the job done. Whereas we're talking almost 3 ounces heavier for the 365 as a pocket gun, still not a deal breaker. All right, so I still think Taurus needs to do a little bit of work on this. For those of you who have a GX4 that's running fine for you, great, more power to you. This particular one for me just isn't quite getting it, but at least we got a chance to try it out. And again, it's a T&E gun. I didn't have to spend my money on it, so it's going back. That's it. A little longer than it should have been, probably. Decent gun. Had hopes for it, but just not cutting it, at least not in my opinion. Anyway, thanks for dropping into Rider's Range.